Hey all, and welcome back to Professor Layton and the Curious Village. In this part we'll be going through the first main chapter of the game, and we're going to be making our way towards Reinhold Manor, which is the manor that we learn about in the prologue. But along the way we're going to be meeting some of the residents of St. Mystere, and I will say up front, I like a lot of these characters. Like, granted, some of them are very much a case of they tick the box, they satisfy a certain archetype, but I'm okay with that. They're characterised enough for me to find them endearing, they bring a lot of life to the town of St. Mystere, and for that they do the job that they're supposed to. But as we also established in the first part, they have a love of puzzles, and everyone you talk to will have some kind of puzzle for you. And this one here up first in this part is Puzzle 4, Where's My House? Where ultimately you need to find where Percy lives.
Luke, here's my answer.
And the way it kind of prompts you to do this, like the hints and whatnot, is you ultimately want to try and work it out backward. You've got the prompt as to where the sun is, and from there you can kind of take a few steps back. Obviously that text there explains it much better than I ever could, so if you're trying to use this as a walkthrough, you're much better off just reading the explanations in the game than listening to me try and fumble my way through an explanation. But I guess that kind of goes without saying whenever you're trying to use a playthrough as a guide. But yeah, again, throughout this game, I am going to be showing off where some of the hint coins are, as and when they're in my direct vicinity. I did have a guide open showing where they are. Sometimes I bothered to get them, sometimes I didn't. So if you want to know where some of the hint coins are, then you'll get enough just by doing what I'm doing. Let's be honest here, it's not really a puzzle game experience without some kind of clock-related puzzle. It's one of those themes that is going to show up a lot in any kind of brain teaser thing. You usually got things like this, you get playing cards, you get sometimes chess pieces, maybe like some balls and slots and things like that. But yeah, here's the obligatory clock one. And it does sort of trick you a little bit here, because you start to think, like, if there's 12 hours and the two hands pass over each other every hour, then that must just mean it's going to be 12 times. But nah, because what he's going to explain here is that they start and end at the same point. So when it's at the 12, it's not going to count as a proper Passover. And I did like that line at the bottom of that explanation there of try it out with a real clock. And there are quite a few puzzles throughout this that prompt you to just think about it for real. And it's the sort of thing that you can think about the puzzle outside of the game, which, you know, it brings it to life in a certain way. And I know that might sound like a really cliche way of explaining it, but, you know, I just really like the way that this game brings in so many different elements into the puzzles. But this chap here is Marco, and despite the fact that he's got the dark sunglasses and he's just sort of loitering in what looks like a not particularly busy area, he's not actually as suspicious as he seems. So maybe try not to be as judgmental as I was when I first came across him here. And it's amusing to me the fact that the guy who I instantly thought this guy looks suspicious also thinks that we're suspicious. And I suppose, like, Professor Layton himself, he's also covering himself a little bit with his top hat, so if you don't recognise a character like this, I kinda get it. But this particular puzzle here, this is one that you can't really just bluff your way through with a guide, because this has a different answer each time. what you need to do is find out which of the weights here, out of the 8 of them, is the lightest. And although you might be inclined to just trial and error this, there is kind of an easy way of doing it, and that is to weigh up 3 on one side and 3 on the other, and you can use that initial answer to kind of filter down of either weighing the 2 that are left, if them 3 on either side come up equal, or if one of these were to come up, unequal, then you would just tinker around with the 3 that ended up lifting up in the air. And this is kind of a difficult concept to describe, which is why I fumbled my way through that. But, in that case, it was number 8. But like I say, this changes every time. So you can't just look up what is the answer to puzzle 6, because that won't work. So yeah, that's basically saying there what I've tried to say of weigh up the 3 on each side, and then you can filter it down from there. How is an apple sharp? I don't quite understand that. Unless you leave the core in and you get a bit of seed that gets stuck in your mouth, but nah, I don't get that expression, mate. And I will say, we're going to hear this instrumental piece a fair bit, but it's very much getting me in the mood to just traverse around this kind of small, closed-in town. I love the music in this game very much, and I'll get more into that as more themes that really click with me show up. But this gentleman here, Ramon, I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's either Ramon or Raymond or Ramon. I'm not entirely sure. I will say that there are different ways to pronounce a name that's spelled like that, but he has a bit of a verbal tick there with the hooligan thing, and he also seems a little bit suspicious by the way that he's acting quite judgmental of us, but when you kind of realise that actually he is in front of the manor there, they're going to be quite defensive of the riches in the village, especially given we're outsiders, nobody knows who we are. It does make sense, but still, lighten up, I've got friendly face, I've got a cool top hat. Now, I recognised this puzzle before I played the game. I believe this is quite a famous style of puzzle. I actually seem to remember doing some stuff like this when I was in primary school with a built-in computer program on the school computers, where you would have to use your brain and try to balance out how many wolves and chicks you can get across. The idea is that you can't have 2 wolves and 1 chick, because then the wolves would gang up and eat the chick. But you also have to have at least one of them on the little boat to go across. So it's a case of just trying to get everyone moved across in as few moves as possible. And you don't actually have to do this in the 11 moves. If you do trial and error it a bit and you end up going over, it doesn't actually matter, but there is a feeling of satisfaction from doing it in the fastest way possible. So if you want to try it again, and this is actually another benefit of being able to pull up the puzzles from the menu, because if you just get a basic answer on your first go, and maybe you took a lot more tries and you want to try again to get in the fewest moves possible, you can do that. I will say, for the sake of this playthrough, I will try to do that for most of the puzzles that are like this, but I won't do it for all of them. There are some where I've just sort of settled for just completing the puzzle, not really worrying about getting the best run possible of the puzzle. Then again, that's the nature of the base twin. This isn't necessarily the style of game that I'm experienced in. I'm playing this, like I said in the prologue, because I like the story and the setting and basically everything about the game, including the puzzles, but the puzzles aren't a strength of mine. And this, what we're seeing here, is an element that you might easily miss, in the fact that As well as the puzzles that the characters that you meet give you, there are also puzzles that you can find by tapping things in the overworld. Like there we just tapped the bushes that were like next to the river, and we've got this bonus puzzle here, farm work. And this one, this is a style of puzzle that does show up quite a few times in the fact that they give you what seems to be a fair bit of redundant information to throw you off. Ultimately, what's going on is that they're going to split it down the middle, and that's all you really need to know. So, like, as long as they both do the same amount of work, they're going to get the same amount of money. But they give you lots of information to distract you, like what their approach is, how long it takes them, and that is irrelevant. You just got to read through the information there and figure out what's the important information that helps you deduce it. So yeah, there we go. Both people get £50. And yes, this is a localized version, as you can tell by the currency. The US release actually has more changes than you might expect for this kind of thing. Because this whole game, it's translated into English fully. There's no reason why you would need to have two different dubs. But for some reason, there's a few changes. Like, there's a few puzzles that are exclusive to the English version, and a few puzzles that are exclusive to the American version. And there's other weird changes along the way, like, the biggest one is that Luke actually has a different voice actress in the US one, and I will talk about the voice actors later on in the playthrough when we need to fill a bit more time. So I will go over that, don't worry, I'm not gonna skip over important information entirely. But it's just one of those weird little quirks that they have changed things that I guess didn't really need to be changed. There are a few, like, edits that they took out some Americanisms, which I will say I do appreciate that element. This is a very British inspired game, and I do understand why it would be beneficial to make it seem more British, but really you could have done that with the American release. I feel like if a lot of people in the US are playing a game that's obviously based in England, then you would keep some English traits just for like authenticity, in the same way that like a lot of anime, when it gets translated and subbed or dubbed, they tend to keep in Japan-centric things, just because it keeps it that little bit more faithful to like the way the game's designed, or the way the show is written, or whatever it may be. But here is Matthew, and Matthew, the first thing he's going to give us is one of the most, I wouldn't say disturbing puzzles, but one of the more out there and makes you wonder what the thought process was. This is a matchstick puzzle, which on the surface seems fair enough. Nothing odd about that. Matches, there's a lot of match puzzles out there that people have made. But what you've got to do is you've got to rearrange the matchsticks so it looks like this healthy dog has been hit by a car. So you've got to think about this from a visual perspective of how can you use these matchsticks here to make the dog looks like it's being flattened. And the trick is to think of it from another perspective. Whereas the first one it shows you is side on, you want to think about it from being like top down and that the dog's being flattened. So yeah, that's, you know, a little bit dark just to throw in there as a introductory puzzle. Like the first thing that this person shows you is when you arrive at the manor, and like, there's the more detailed picture showing a dog that's being run over, and like, Jesus Christ, dude. Like, this was the test puzzle that Lady Dahlia wanted us to do. So maybe she's like thinking of if they can not be freaked out by this when they first arrive, maybe they'll be the right person for the task. Given somebody has died and that's why we're here, you know, we're trying to look into an inheritance like dispute kind of thing here. Like there's the gentleman himself who passed away. This is Baron Reinhold. So like, I guess it is very much a case of if they're okay with this bizarre puzzle, they'll be okay with whatever dark stuff shows up later on in the tale. I don't know. I don't really understand Lady Dahlia's way of thinking, especially given she was the one who didn't give us like flat out directions here. She was the one who made us do that puzzle to find our way to the village. But then again, that does reek of the characters testing us, and it makes sense. It makes sense. Maybe it will make more sense later on, but it makes sense. But what we're getting here, the painting scraps. I will be collecting these along the way, but when it comes to the actual mechanic that they're used for, we're going to be basically ignoring them till right at the end of the game. Because what you essentially have to do is you have to collect, I think it's about 26 painting scraps along the way, like it's 20 something. You get all these different scraps, and then once you've got them all, it's a kind of jigsaw that you want to put together, and it forms a painting. And when you form the painting, you can unlock extra goodies. So I'll be coming back to it once I've collected them all. But this here is another bonus puzzle, and I will say flat out, the maths puzzles are the ones that stump me. I reckon if I were to put the time in to just sit down and calculate everything, I might be able to do it. Like, I'm not horrible when it comes to maths. Like, I passed my GCSEs okay in maths. I think I got a B in maths GCSEs, and I think I got a B in statistics as well. But I don't really have it come to me. I did cheat with the maths ones. I will say that up front. I did cheat with the maths ones. I would maybe have a half-hearted guess, like, from the hints that the game gives you, and then I'll just think, nah. And that is just a personal thing. Like, I don't get as much satisfaction from solving maths puzzles as I do from logic puzzles and the like. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to just play the game the way I want to play it, and for those puzzles I did skip over doing them properly. So that will mean in the commentary, they're the ones that I have the least amount of information to give you. So I apologise for that. But, you know, I hope I can still make this as entertaining as possible regardless.
Oh? Oh, you must be Professor Layton, I presume. It's an honor to make your acquaintance.
Oh no, the pleasure's all mine.
No!
Luke!
Come back, sweetie!
And I think that cat is off. But yes, I will say Lady Dahlia's voice, I really like the way she's presented, of just being this very uptight, posh, well-spoken character. Her voice actress there did a fantastic job of capturing that. And also, in terms of the cutscenes, you may notice that this is a DS game, and the audio quality isn't amazing. Like, even with the fact that I've had to record this through an analog connection, on the DS itself, or the 3DS that I played it on, it's not the best quality, but I actually think that complements the tone of the game very well. It's very much a, like, unintentional benefit, because, like, I don't think any game designer will think, okay, I'm going to compress our audio more than it needs to be. But when you hear that slightly lower quality thing that complements the setting here, it all comes together. It's almost like you're watching an older film or something, and I just have a bizarre kind of appreciation for that kind of thing. And here's another maths puzzle. But this one, it's a puzzle about shapes and working out like the lengths as lines and stuff, so it's not quite as number-based, and I think I did actually get this one myself. Got to work out the length of the line there, and I seem to recall having a similar puzzle or a similar question on one of my maths GCSE papers. So that might have been why that came to me. I can't remember the specifics of how it works, which the game's going to explain to us here, so it's not a big deal. Yeah, it's like the same as the opposite thing there. But I just sort of, it came to me straight away of it's gonna work out like that. It's gonna be the same as the horizontal x-axis line. And yeah, I will say that I really don't get much use at all from my GCSEs these days, so you can kind of piece together why I don't really have that come to mind that much. But every now and then, something like this comes up and I just think back and think, oh yeah, I sort of recognise this. I thought that part of my memory had gone entirely, but apparently it hasn't. And here is yet another puzzle. This is another one of the bonus puzzles. If you see the number go over 100, then it's probably a more difficult one for the most part. This, I will say, is actually quite an exception, because you just need to move this one matchstick to change the perspective to make it look like a cube's been removed. And the matchstick ones I do like because they're more visual. They're the ones that I tend to be better at, because I can just piece together the way things look. It's more so how they look than, like, say, having to calculate something. So these are my particular strengths, I would say. Obviously, there's going to be some exceptions along the way, because some of the puzzles do get a lot more challenging on the whole. But, you know, when you're playing through a game like this, you do start to notice trends of which ones you have a chance at and which ones you're going to have to go to the guide for. So what we're going to be doing for the rest of the part now is we're going to be getting some information from all these different characters. We got Gordon here, who I'm not sure if he'll be doing this right away, but over time he becomes like the typical lonely bachelor kind of character who asks you to find him someone to fall in love with and stuff like that over time. So he's got that to him. We've got Matthew, who we met at the entrance. He seems to be like the punished sort of, I guess he's a groundskeeper kind of person, a caretaker. And he seems to get the arse end of whatever mood Lady Dahlia seems to be in, because right now the cat has run away and she's just going to keep snapping. She's snapping at us, she's snapping at Matthew a bit. And spoiler, the entirety of the next chapter will revolve around us going to find this cat. This cat is her baby and she needs it back there and then. And Layton does have a point. Cats are very much, they find their way around. Whereas dogs, you know, they live at home and they need constant attention because they're lovable and they just want cuddles. Cats, they sort of fuck off and then they come back for dinner. You know, I've had both cats and dogs over the course of my lifetime, and there's a very big difference in how they act. And I don't think it's natural for a cat to be pampered quite so much. Like, I cringe a little bit when I see people with, like, you know, the toy puppy dogs, the ones that ride around in handbags and stuff. But, like, even then, at least that's a dog, and dogs appreciate the attention like that. Whereas cats, like, the cat just wants to go out and, you know, climb around and run around and just get some fresh air. But that'll do us for this part of Professor Layton and the Curious Village. Join us next time where we'll start looking for that bloody cat. See you then.